Did you know humans might have understood that the Earth orbits the Sun almost 2,000 years before it became common knowledge? Or that steam engines, not just as toys but as potential power sources, were tinkered with in ancient times? What if doctors had mapped the human nervous system and performed complex surgeries centuries before the Renaissance, all thanks to knowledge gathered in one magnificent place that tragically vanished in flames? The Library of Alexandria wasn't just a collection of scrolls. It was a beacon of human intellect, and its destruction plunged the world into a prolonged intellectual twilight. Imagine a world where its treasures weren't lost. Number 8. The secrets of plants and animals mapped out centuries earlier. Imagine a world where scientists understood the intricate web of life much, much sooner. In Alexandria, the study of botany and zoology wasn't just a casual hobby. It was a serious scientific pursuit. Think of Theophrastus, a student of Aristotle, often called the father of botany. His works, like Enquiry into Plants and On the Causes of Plants, were foundational. These texts, and likely many others inspired by them, would have been prized possessions in the great library. The library wasn't just a passive storage facility. It was a dynamic center of research. Scholars would have had access to accounts from travelers, traders, and military expeditions fanning out from Egypt across roads of Africa, Asia, and Europe. These accounts would have contained descriptions of exotic plants and animals, their behaviors, their habitats, and their uses. Imagine scrolls detailing medicinal herbs from the heart of Africa, strange creatures from the distant East, or farming techniques from fertile Mesopotamian plains. If these collections had survived and grown the systematic classification of species, a task Linnaeus would undertake in the 18th century might have begun in earnest in the ancient world. Detailed botanical gardens and zoological menageries, inspired by the knowledge within the library, could have become centers for empirical study. Understanding plant genetics, even in a rudimentary form, could have revolutionized agriculture far earlier, leading to hardier crops, increased yields, and a better-fed population. The knowledge of medicinal plants, meticulously cataloged and cross-referenced, would have been a goldmine. Instead of relying on fragmented folklore, physicians could have had access to a vast pharmacopoeia. This could have led to the earlier discovery of effective treatments for common ailments, reducing suffering and mortality. Think of the quinine for malaria, or digitalis for heart conditions. Their properties might have been identified and utilized systematically centuries before they were. Furthermore, a deeper, earlier understanding of animal anatomy and physiology, built upon by studying diverse species, could have informed human medicine as well. Observations of animal behavior in more structured ways might have laid early groundwork for ethology and even evolutionary thought. Concept of adaptation, the interconnectedness of species, the impact of environment, these ideas might have blossomed much sooner if the vast repository of Alexandrian biological data had been available to succeeding generations of scholars. The loss wasn't just of texts, but of a budding, systematic approach to understanding the living world, a delay that cost centuries of potential progress in medicine, agriculture, and ecological awareness. Number 7. Cities built with engineering marvels we only rediscovered later. Picture ancient cities with advanced water systems, amazing mechanical contraptions, and construction techniques that would seem astonishing even by later Roman standards. The minds at Alexandria weren't just pondering philosophy. They were master engineers and inventors. Figures like Archimedes of Syracuse, though not permanently based in Alexandria, had strong connections there, and his groundbreaking works on levers, pulleys, hydrostatics, and war machines would have been prime acquisitions for the library. Eusebius of Alexandria, the father of pneumatics, invented the hydraulic organ and improved the water clock. Hero of Alexandria, who came later, documented and possibly invented a wide array of mechanical devices, including the first steam-powered engine, the aeolipile, automatic temple doors, and surveying tools. The scrolls in the library would have contained not just theoretical treatises on mechanics, hydraulics, and engineering principles, but also practical blueprints, diagrams, and instruction manuals. Imagine lost works detailing how to construct more efficient cranes for lifting massive stones, advanced pumps for draining mines or supplying water to multi-story buildings, or even sophisticated siege engines that could have altered the course of ancient warfare in ways we can't fully grasp. If this engineering knowledge had been preserved and built upon, the urban landscape of the ancient and medieval world could have been vastly different. Aqueducts might have been more widespread and more advanced, providing cleaner water to larger populations and improving sanitation. Public baths could have featured ingenious heating and water circulation systems. The principles of structural engineering, understood more deeply, could have led to larger, more stable, and more ambitious buildings. Think about the everyday impact. More efficient mills for grinding grain, powered by water, or even early steam devices, could have freed up human labor. Automated systems, even simple ones, for tasks like opening large doors or operating fountains, would have demonstrated the power of mechanical innovation. The science of hydraulics, which Ctesibius pioneered, could have led to more sophisticated irrigation systems, boosting agricultural output across arid regions. The loss of these texts meant that many engineering principles had to be rediscovered painfully, slowly, over centuries. Roman engineering, impressive as it was, might have itself benefited and been surpassed if the full corpus of Hellenistic engineering knowledge from Alexandria had remained accessible. Potential for labor-saving devices, improved infrastructure, and a faster trajectory towards more complex machinery was immense. The steam engine, for instance, if developed beyond Hero's toy like Aeoli pile using principles perhaps detailed in lost scrolls, could have kick-started an industrial revolution millennia ahead of schedule. The burning of the library wasn't just a loss of books, it was a loss of practical know how that could have reshaped the physical world much sooner. Number 6. Seeing the universe and the microscopic world centuries ahead of time. Galileo pointing his telescope to the heavens in the 1st century AD instead of the 17th, or Lee Ivanhoe discovering bacteria not long after? This isn't pure fantasy if the study of optics in Alexandria had continued its trajectory. The ancient Greeks were fascinated by light and vision. Euclid, whose elements formed the basis of geometry, also wrote optics, which discussed perspective and the properties of light traveling in straight lines. Hero of Alexandria explored mirrors and reflection. Claudius Ptolemy, working in Alexandria in the 2nd century AD, conducted experiments on the refraction of light as it passed from air to water, and his work Optics, though parts are lost, detailed his findings. The Library of Alexandria would have been the central repository for all such knowledge. It likely held numerous treatises on light, mirrors, and vision, perhaps even early explorations into lenses. While glassmaking existed, the precise grinding of lenses for magnification was a later development. However, with a concentrated hub of scholars studying the theoretical principles of light and refraction, as documented by Ptolemy and others, the leap to crafting rudimentary telescopes and microscopes could have occurred far earlier. What if scholars in Alexandria, armed with this knowledge, began experimenting systematically with curved glass surfaces? Principles of magnification were not entirely unknown. Seneca wrote about using a glass globe filled with water to magnify letters. If the theoretical framework preserved in the library had been actively pursued, the invention of the telescope might not have waited for Dutch spectacle makers in the early 1600s. An earlier invention of the telescope would have revolutionized astronomy. Instead of relying solely on naked eye observations, astronomers could have seen the moons of Jupiter, the phases of Venus, the craters on the moon, and the true nature of the Milky Way centuries before Galileo. This empirical evidence would have provided powerful support for heliocentric models like Aristarchus's. More on that later, potentially accelerating the shift away from a geocentric universe by over a millennium. Similarly, the microscope could have opened up the unseen microbial world. Imagine ancient physicians or natural philosophers peering through early microscopes, discovering bacteria, protozoa, and cells. This could have fundamentally changed the understanding of disease, moving away from theories of humors or miasmas much sooner toward the germ theory. Hygiene, sanitation, and medical treatments could have advanced dramatically. The study of biology would have been transformed, allowing for the earlier examination of plant and animal tissues, insect anatomy, and the myriad of tiny life forms that surround us. The loss of advanced optical texts, or even just the environment that fostered such inquiry, delayed these crucial inventions. The world remained blind to the vastness of the cosmos and the intricacies of the microscopic realm for many additional centuries, a direct consequence of the knowledge that flickered out with the flames of the library. Number 5. The language of science and nature deciphered far sooner. Mathematics is the language of the universe, and the scholars associated with Alexandria were fluent in it, pushing its boundaries in ways that were unparalleled for their time. Euclid, often called the father of geometry, taught in Alexandria, and his Elements became the standard geometry textbook for over 2,000 years. Imagine the other, perhaps more advanced or specialized, geometrical treatises that might have been lost. Archimedes, a titan of mathematics, physics, and engineering, studied in Alexandria, or at least corresponded extensively with mathematicians there. His work on pi, on the areas and volumes of complex shapes, and his method of exhaustion, a precursor to integral calculus, were revolutionary. While some of his works survive, others are known only through references, and it's highly probable that the library held unique copies, or even lost treatises. Apollonius of Perga, who flourished in Alexandria, wrote an extensive work on conic sections, ellipses, parabolas, hyperbolas, that was foundational for later developments and physics. Much of his work is lost, particularly the later, more complex books. Diophantus of Alexandria, known as the father of algebra, introduced symbolism into algebra and worked on what are now called Diophantine equations. Only a portion of his major work, Arithmetica, survives. And let's not forget Hypatia of Alexandria, a renowned mathematician and philosopher who taught and wrote commentaries on earlier mathematical works, most of which are now lost. The library would have been a treasure trove of these mathematical texts and countless others, from advanced number theory to sophisticated geometric proofs, from early algebraic explorations to nascent ideas of calculus. The survival and continued study of this body of work could have dramatically accelerated scientific progress. Engineering projects would have benefited from more advanced mathematical tools for calculation and design. Physics, which relies heavily on mathematics to model reality, could have developed more sophisticated theories much earlier. Astronomy, already a strong suit of Alexandrian scholars, would have gained even more powerful methods for calculating planetary orbits and understanding celestial mechanics. Consider the development of calculus by Newton and Leibniz in the 17th century. It was a monumental leap that unlocked modern physics and engineering. Yet, Archimedes had touched upon concepts very close to integral calculus. If his method and other similar explorations by Alexandrian mathematicians had been widely available and studied, the principles of calculus might have been formalized centuries earlier. This would have given thinkers like Copernicus, Kepler, and Galileo an even more powerful mathematical arsenal. The loss of these mathematical works, or the interruption of the intellectual tradition that produced them, created a chasm in mathematical development. It took centuries for European scholars to rediscover and then build upon the knowledge that had once been concentrated in Alexandria. The equations that describe the natural world, the logical structures that underpin engineering marvels, and the abstract beauty of pure mathematics could have been part of humanity's stucot far sooner, shortening the path to many later scientific and technological breakthroughs. Number 4. Knowing our planet's true shape and size and mapping it accurately. Imagine, over 2,000 years ago, someone calculating the Earth's circumference with astonishing accuracy using just sticks, shadows, and some clever geometry. That someone was Eratosthenes, the chief librarian of the Library of Alexandria around 240 BC. He famously observed that on the summer solstice, the sun was directly overhead in Syene, modern Aswan, while at the same time in Alexandria, it cast a measurable shadow. Knowing the distance between the two cities, he calculated the Earth's circumference with an error of only a few %. This was a monumental achievement. The details of Eratosthenes' method, his exact measurements, and perhaps refinements or alternative calculations by other scholars, would have been meticulously documented in scrolls within the library. Beyond just the Earth's size, the library was likely a hub for cartography. Alexandria, as a major port and center of trade, received information from sailors, merchants, and explorers who ventured across the Mediterranean, down the Red Sea, and perhaps even further. These accounts, translated and compiled, would have formed the basis for increasingly accurate maps of the known world. Claudius Ptolemy, working in Alexandria in the 2nd century AD, wrote his Geographia, a compilation of all known geographical knowledge of his time. It included a system of latitude and longitude and attempted to map the entire known world. While influential for centuries, Ptolemy's work contained significant errors, such as underestimating the Earth's circumference. He used a less accurate figure than Eratosthenes, and overestimating the extent of the Eurasian landmass. It's highly plausible that the library contained sources and data that could have corrected some of Ptolemy's errors, or alternative maps that were more accurate in certain regions. Perhaps Eratosthenes himself or his successors produced more detailed world maps based on his accurate circumference. If this advanced geographical knowledge had been preserved and widely disseminated, the implications would have been enormous. Firstly, the understanding of our planet as a sphere of a known size would have been more firmly established much earlier, potentially dispelling lingering flat Earth notions more effectively. Secondly, more accurate maps would have revolutionized navigation and trade. Columbus, for example, relied on Ptolemy's underestimated circumference, which contributed to his belief that he had reached the East Indies. With Eratosthenes' more accurate figures and potentially better maps from Alexandrian sources, the age of exploration might have unfolded differently, perhaps with less guesswork and fewer misadventures. Explorers might have had a clearer idea of the distances involved in transoceanic voyages. Knowledge of coastlines, prevailing winds, and ocean currents, compiled from countless mariners' reports stored in the library, could have made sea travel safer and more efficient. Understanding of distant lands and cultures documented by ancient travelers could have fostered earlier and perhaps more informed interactions between civilizations. The loss of the library's geographical archive meant that much of this painstaking work of measuring and mapping the world was set back. Cartography had to slowly relearn and rediscover what had once been known in Alexandria. The true scale of our planet and the accurate depiction of its lands and seas took many more centuries to re-establish, a delay that directly impacted humanity's ability to navigate, explore, and understand its global home. Number 3, unlocking the secrets of the human body and revolutionizing medicine. Imagine doctors in the 3rd century BC understanding the difference between sensory and motor nerves, knowing that the brain, not the heart, was the center of intelligence, and even performing human dissections to learn about anatomy. This was happening in Alexandria, thanks to pioneers like Herophilus of Chalcedon and Erasistratus of Chios. These two physicians, working under the patronage of the Ptolemies, pushed the boundaries of medical knowledge in ways that would not be seen again for over 1,500 years. Herophilus is often called the father of anatomy. He was one of the first, if not the first, to systematically dissect human bodies. Through these dissections, he made incredible discoveries. He distinguished between arteries and veins, noting that arteries pulsate. He described the brain in detail, identifying the cerebrum and cerebellum, and recognized it as the seat of the intellect. He meticulously described the nervous system, differentiating between motor nerves, controlling movement, and sensory nerves, transmitting sensation. He also studied the eye, the liver, the pancreas, and the reproductive organs, providing detailed anatomical descriptions. Erasistratus, a contemporary of Herophilus, also conducted dissections and focused on physiology, how the body functions. He studied the circulatory and nervous systems, coming close to understanding blood circulation, though he believed arteries carried air. He described the heart's valves and understood that the heart acted as a pump. He also made detailed observations about the brain, noting the convolutions and linking them to intelligence. Some accounts, though controversial even in antiquity, suggest both Herophilus and Erasistratus may have even performed vivisections on condemned criminals, allowing them to observe the workings of living organs. The writings, anatomical charts, and case studies produced by Herophilus, Erasistratus, and their students would have been among the most precious texts in the Library of Alexandria. These wouldn't have been just theoretical musings. They would have been based on direct observation of human anatomy. If this body of knowledge had survived and been built upon, the course of medicine could have been radically different. For centuries after the decline of Alexandrian medical research, human dissection became taboo in many cultures. Medical understanding stagnated, relying on the less accurate theories of Galen, who himself studied in Alexandria but much later and mostly dissected animals. Imagine if the detailed anatomical atlases of Herophilus had been available to physicians throughout the Middle Ages. Surgical procedures, instead of being crude and often fatal, could have become more precise and effective much earlier. Understanding of diseases could have advanced more rapidly if based on accurate knowledge of anatomy and physiology, rather than on theories of imbalanced humors. The insights into the brain and nervous system were particularly profound. Recognizing the brain as the control center and understanding the function of nerves could have led to earlier breakthroughs in treating neurological disorders or injuries. The long, dark centuries of medical ignorance, where basic anatomy was misunderstood and treatments were often harmful, might have been significantly shortened. The loss of the Alexandrian medical texts was a tragedy that directly impacted the health and well-being of countless generations, delaying by well over a millennium the kind of empirical observation-based medicine that Herophilus and Erasistratus had pioneered. Number 2. Powering an ancient world with steam and ingenious machines. Picture this: ancient temples with doors that swing open automatically as the priest approaches, fountains that operate with complex mechanisms, and even a device that spins furiously when heated by fire, a rudimentary steam engine. This wasn't science fiction. This was the world of Hero of Alexandria, an incredible mathematician and engineer who lived sometime in the 1st century AD. His inventions and writings, many of which would have been housed in the great library, cogaced a level of mechanical ingenuity that feels centuries ahead of its time. Hero's most famous invention is the aeolipile, often described as the first recorded steam engine. It was a hollow sphere mounted on an axle with 2 L-shaped nozzles pointing in opposite directions. When water inside the sphere was heated, steam would escape through the nozzles, causing the sphere to rotate. While Hero likely saw it as a fascinating curiosity, a temple wonder, or a demonstration of scientific principles, the potential was enormous. His writings also described a wind-powered organ, a fire engine, a vending machine that dispensed holy water when a coin was inserted, various automata, self-moving machines for theatrical performances, and even a programmable cart. The scrolls detailing Hero's designs, along with those of other Alexandrian inventors like Ctesibius, who worked with compressed air and hydraulics, would have been a gold mine of mechanical knowledge. These texts wouldn't just have described the devices themselves, but also the principles of pneumatics, hydraulics, and mechanics behind them. Imagine detailed diagrams, calculations, and instructions for building these and perhaps even more complex machines. If this knowledge had been preserved, actively studied, and built upon, what might have happened? The Aeol pile, if seen not just as a toy, but as a potential source of power, could have been refined. Engineers could have experimented with converting its rotational motion into useful work. Perhaps early, inefficient steam pumps or steam-powered bellows could have emerged centuries before James Watt. While a full-blown industrial revolution in the ancient world faced many other hurdles, like metallurgy and a different socio-economic structure, the foundational understanding of steam power and its applications could have taken root far earlier. Think about the impact on labor. Even simple automated machines or more efficient tools powered by basic engines could have eased human toil in areas like grinding grain, pumping water, or lifting heavy objects in construction. Hero's programmable cart, which used a system of ropes and weights to follow a preset path, hinted at early concepts of automation and control systems. If these ideas had been developed further, who knows what kinds of sophisticated automata or mechanical aids might have appeared in the centuries that followed. The loss of these Alexandrian engineering texts, or the societal conditions that prevented their full exploitation, meant that the principles of steam power and advanced automation lay dormant for over 1,500 years. The spark of ingenuity demonstrated by Hero and his predecessors flickered out, only to be painstakingly reignited much later. The world had to wait until the 18th century for the steam engine to truly begin reshaping society, a transformation that might have had ancient origins if the scrolls of Alexandria had survived to inspire future generations of inventors and engineers. The potential for an earlier mechanical age, driven by the insights of Alexandrian geniuses, was tragically lost. Number 1. Knowing our true place in the cosmos 1,700 years sooner. Imagine it's the 3rd century BC. Most of the learned world believes the Earth is the center of the universe, with the sun, moon, planets, and stars all revolving around it. But in Alexandria, or connected to its vibrant intellectual community, a man named Aristarchus of Samos proposes a radical, almost unbelievable idea. The Earth is not central. Instead, he suggests the Earth and the other planets revolve around the sun. This was the heliocentric model, the very same idea that Nicolaus Copernicus would famously champion nearly 1,700 years later, sparking a scientific revolution. Aristarchus didn't just pluck this idea from thin air. He was a brilliant mathematician and astronomer. He developed an ingenious method to estimate the relative sizes of the sun and moon and their distances from Earth. Though his calculations had errors due to observational limitations, his geometric methods were sound. His work led him to conclude that the sun was vastly larger than the Earth. This immense size difference may have been a key reason he proposed that it was more logical for the smaller Earth to orbit the larger sun rather than the other way around. Only a summary of Aristarchus's work on the sizes and distances of the sun and moon survives. His book outlining the heliocentric hypothesis itself is lost. We know about it primarily through references from later writers, like Archimedes and Plutarch, who mentioned his theory, often with skepticism. The great Library of Alexandria would undoubtedly have held Aristarchus's original treatise, complete with his arguments, his mathematical proofs, and possibly obvotional data, supporting his revolutionary worldview. What if that detailed work had survived and been actively debated and studied by subsequent generations of astronomers within the library's supportive intellectual environment? The geocentric model, championed by Aristotle and later mathematically refined by Ptolemy, also in Alexandria, centuries after Aristarchus, became deeply entrenched. But if Aristarchus's full arguments and evidence had been readily available, perhaps more ancient astronomers would have been persuaded, or at least would have continued to explore and test his hypothesis. The shift from a geocentric to a heliocentric understanding of the cosmos was one of the most profound intellectual upheavals in human history. It didn't just reorder the planets, it reshaped humanity's understanding of its place in the universe, challenging deeply held philosophical and theological beliefs. If this revolution had occurred in antiquity, or even in the early centuries AD, the trajectory of science could have been dramatically altered. Physics would have been forced to grapple with the implications of a moving Earth much earlier. The development of celestial mechanics, later achieved by Kepler and Newton, might have found its ancient roots in attempts to refine Aristarchus's model. Telescopes, had they been developed earlier, as discussed in another point, would have provided stunning visual confirmation of heliocentrism, the phases of Venus, the moons of Jupiter, centuries before Galileo's observations. The loss of Aristarchus's complete work on heliocentrism, and the subsequent dominance of the geocentric view for well over a millennium, represents one of the greatest what-ifs in the history of science. The intellectual energy spent refining and defending the increasingly complex geocentric model could have been directed towards understanding the true solar system. The library's destruction didn't just burn scrolls. It buried a vision of the cosmos that was astonishingly ahead of its time, delaying a fundamental shift in human understanding for an almost unimaginable span of history. The stars waited, and humanity waited, for a truth that had already been glimpsed.